Good morning, folks. Welcome to another week of Linux. My name is Manny Correa. This week's video is going to be about the Apache web server, or www server. We're going to talk a bit about the basics, so how to install it, where are the config files, what's in the config files, where's the default locations, and let's get into it. So the first thing is let's figure out how to install the Apache web server. We use sudo apt install Apache 2. Apache 2 is the version that we're using today. I think that's our latest and greatest. 2.4.41, it looks like it is the latest. I've already installed it, but that's how you would install it. How do you check to see if it's running? We use that same command, systemctl again. So we use sudo systemctl status Apache 2. And you see that it's running. So how do we check to see if we have a website? I'm going to show you our default website. It's a very basic one web page, and you would use your Firefox application or any other web browser that you have. By default, Ubuntu installs Firefox on the desktop. This is what you can use to test it out. And where or how would I try to connect to that? So if we remember back in the chapter 18, we talked about our local address. So we could either use 127.0.0.1 or we could use the local host name. This is our default web page, and it's only one web page. It's actually a website, so if there was links on here we could go to another one, and it's basically just HTML. I'm not going to get into what HTML or how to do HTML, but we're going to go and show you where it is. Right here is where it's located, and that's the name of the file. So web pages are just files on the server, and you use a web browser to go connect to them. I'll get more into that in the Monday night video. So if we go to cd/var, and there is a www folder right here, and that is the default location for your web pages. And we change to www, make our working directory. We look inside here. There's actually a folder called HTML. This is the default for Apache 2 that we have set up. If you wanted to do more websites, you can actually create more folders in here and just keep doing more folders and more folders. I'm just gonna show you what's inside here, just to show you that it's just one file, and it's called index.html. And if we did looked at that file, because it is just a text file, or HTML is a text file, so index.html. And this is what HTML looks like, and that's what this web page looks like. Does anybody know what HTML stands for? It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. So also, web server uses what protocol? And it's called HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. And so that's the protocol that governs the communications between the client, the web browser, and the server, the web server. So now I'm going to show you where the config files are. And so they're in Etsy, but the location in Etsy is actually in the Apache 2 folder. So we're going to go to Apache 2 folder. And there's lots of files in here. So the main one we're going to look at right now is the apache2.conf. This points to all of the other config files that you have in here, and there's some configurations in here. So let's go look at that. apache2.conf. And you're going to get a lot of remarks, or these are the comments. These are actually directions for a lot of the usage of your web server itself. To get more information, you can go to the Apache project page, which would probably be a good idea if you're going to run a web server. And some of the main things that we kind of tinker with is if we're only running one website is just sticking with the default location or wherever you're going to put your web files, and then you'd have to change your files to point to that location. And the ports is something else that people like to change. So the default port for a basic web server or a non-secure web server is port 80. Sometimes this gets changed, so we will go look at that and I'll show you where to change that. And then the other thing is a secure web server. So many websites are secure, meaning that they are encrypted when you want to connect to them. When you put security on a web server, you also put in authentication. And when you do authentication, that means you need to have your users. And again, we have to do user management. So default port for a secure website is 443. So both port 80 and 443 are the two default ports for websites. These can change as long as the client knows where the port has changed to. You can connect to that web server. Does that make sense? So TCP port 80 and TCP port 443 are the two default ports for web servers. The non-secure is port 80, the secure is port 443. In here, we point to all the other files, all the other directories to point to our web server. And if we were going to do modifications, like if we were going to do a secure web server, this would point to that location, and then we'd have a config in the other location pointing to whatever our certificate is. Right now, I'm going to show you the ports.config file. So this is the location to change if you're going to change your port. So it's listening on a port. So port 80 is the default for the unsecure, and you can change this. You just edit this file and change this to whatever port you want. Standard port is 8080, but you can change it to anything. People like to do it high up, and this is just in case you want to run kind of out of the box kind of thing. Also, if you wanted to run multiple websites on the same server. You're like, So we have one web server running here. It's called Apache 2. We have one website running on this web server. This is actually in a virtual host. So what we could do is run multiple websites on this one server. We'd have to change the port for those other websites. So that's the other thing you could do. So you could have multiple websites running on the same server as long as you have different ports to them. The other alternative is to set up different IPs, and then it gets a little crazy in your networking side. It can be done, but there's multiple ways of skinning this cat, per se. If we were going to change the SSL, or it's called Secure Socket Layer, this is the encryption port for secure website, we could change this to 8443 or 88443, whichever one we want. You can do that, and it'll still work, but again, client needs to know where it is. So the other location I wanted to show you is the sites available. So in the sites available directory, you would have the other sites that if you are doing multiple hosting, multiple sites on your web server, you would actually have different config files in here for them. These are the default pages. So there's the default secure, and there's the default page. So you would have whatever site you'd want in here, you'd have to have another config file for that. If it was secure, then you'd have to have a secure one. And let's go check out the default. And oops, did I not type that right? 00 default.c1f. I think I typed it wrong. Oh, 000. Duh. My fault. Fat finger that one. Okay, so this is the default location where it's pointing to, so you need to know where that is. Server admin, which would be you'd put in your information, whoever was in charge of the page. So when somebody goes to the page, they have a question, they can email somebody about it. And it's virtual hosting. So there's not much in here. It's just making sure that it's pointing to the right location. You can actually make new logs too. And point them there, so each website has their own log, and this would be a place to do that too. And you can change your, instead of log level, meaning that the default is the warning, but you could give it, like if you had problems with it, you could put it into debugging mode rather than warning mode. And debugging would tell you a lot about how the connections are going to your web server. And this is kind of how you troubleshoot, by changing your log level. And then you go to the website and duplicate the error that you're getting, and then you go look at your log and to check and see what's going on with it. That's some of the basics about the website, the web server itself, the checking to see if it's running, the checking the logs, looking at the config files. I'm going to get more in depth in some of the security and the user management on tonight's or Monday night's video, and you can check that out. So, wrapping things up, thanks again for showing up, and I will see you next time.